You're listening to the Connection Care Community Podcast, a podcast designed to help you understand your body more deeply and feel more confident navigating your hormones, cycle, and fertility. Each episode offers grounded, research-informed guidance and integrative tools to support hormone health, embodied awareness, and informed choice. If you're seeking clarity, connection, and a more trusting relationship with your body, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Here's your host, the founder of Connection Care Therapy, Majida.
Hello and welcome to the Connection Care Community Podcast. My name is Majida, and today we're chatting about cycle syncing, specifically what happens when even a practice that is designed to support us and connect us and help us feel more aligned quietly turns into pressure. Cycle syncing is oftentimes introduced as a relief, as a way to work with your body instead of working against your body. It's something that you'll hear many, including myself, say that it can bring a sense of ease and rhythm and self-trust into your life. And for many people, it does start out this way. But sometimes, even body literacy can quietly shift into self-judgment or into performance metrics that to say the least, it doesn't really feel great. So what I would like to do today is kind of unpack that conversation. And where do we start? I think we start with what is this idea as to every phase matching a very specific experience. Because more than likely, if you've gotten into cycle syncing at all, you've heard the phrase, what phase and a phrase, it's what your body is supposed to be doing at any certain time, right? This is the phase that you're in, and this is like the phrase. You're supposed to be energetic, right? You're in your follicular phase. You're supposed to feel like hyped. You're in your luteal phase, you're supposed to feel chill. You're in your menstrual phase, you're supposed to, right? It's a suppose. Or if we're using the word should, you're like shoulding all over yourself. So, right, what happens if in your follicular phase, instead of what you should feel, high energy, you actually feel flat and foggy and withdrawn? What happens if in your luteal phase, when you should, feel like this sense of easeful flow, self-reflection, you actually find yourself bracing for irritability or fatigue? What if during your menstrual time, you, instead of feeling intuitive, and you just feel exhausted and deeply overstimulated? And one of the things I'll actually point out, this was really inspired by, I have a dear friend of mine who is also an incredible fertility awareness educator. And when we were going through our training together in fertility awareness education, she just started to point out how during ovulation, she felt angry a lot, filled with just anger and frustration. And I actually noticed I would have similar ovulations where I had times right around my ovulation where I was actually feeling, instead of, I want to be more social and I feel sexy and ready to, negotiate a raise and all of those other things. I was I was pissy and angry and snappy, So when this happens, it can create an internal dialogue that often shifts from exploration and curiosity to evaluation. Why don't I feel how I'm supposed to? Did I miss a sign? Am I failing as cycle syncing? And I just want to put an offer on the table, is that when these kinds of experiences happen, that it's not about a lack of awareness, that it's about turning this relational practice into something that has to do more with a performance metric, something that we feel like a box that we need to check off, even if that box is about ourselves. So ideally, cycle syncing is supposed to build trust, but trust erodes when there is a sensation that is measured, and that sensation can go against our expectations. I see this with people who are really conscientious, who are deeply invested in their health. It can oftentimes be, and in case you haven't noticed, I am definitely one of those people, right, who deeply invested in health, strive to be as conscientious as possible, and then reality doesn't match some of the things that that you learn, and this discrepancy can feel personal, and that awareness can then turn into vigilance, and tracking can feel like you're monitoring. I remember this one client who had been super strict about cycle syncing for around 6 months. She was doing all of the things, all of the shoulds, right? Nutrition and workouts, and even scheduling her work around her cycle calendar. And she came to me sharing that she felt actually worse than she did before. It was like a really, really powerful experience to have, in working with someone who was navigating doing all of the checklist things, and the checklist was actually what was making her feel terrible. When we just actually, just allowed for some breathing room and some space to explore what was going on, what she realized is that she was overriding her body's signals in order to match what the phase should feel like. She would push through intense workouts when she was actually depleted. She would force herself to be social when she actually wanted to rest. And then she would feel guilty about wanting to move. She actually liked to do dancing during her menstrual cycle, but was like, I'm supposed to be like doing rest, and rest had a very specific connotation. So cycle syncing had become another set of rules for her to follow instead of a tool to support her in listening to her body. Physiologically, it makes sense that our experiences won't match typical patterns. Typical patterns ideally are just being used as guidelines or points of reflection, but really they're just patterns, right? There's patterns that some people may have sometimes and that other people may have never. Hormones are influenced by many different things, and hormones are some of the key components to cycle syncing. These things can be sleep quality, right? If we have poor sleep, we have a disruption in cortisol and estrogen, progesterone, or blood sugar, right? Crashes can override hormonal energy patterns. Emotional load and stress. If you're navigating something like grief or work pressure or relational stress, all of these things can impact reproductive hormones, inflammation and gut health, immune system health. Our gut metabolizes a good portion of our hormones, so if it's out of balance, our cycles can oftentimes reflect that. And then you have life itself, right? Life, and relationships and light exposure and seasons and just the work pattern, all of the things. All of these can influence our nervous system and our hormones. Our body is going to respond to the context that it's existing in, not some kind of like rule book or calendar that we expect it to. So expecting energy or mood to arrive on schedule can oftentimes set us up for disappointment. Not because cycle syncing is something that doesn't work, but because our bodies are responsive. Okay, our bodies are responsive. There's another layer to all of this, and I'm going to dive right into it. That layer is comparison. Especially with social media, especially with online stuff. Wellness spaces oftentimes show these patterns as like some kind of a benchmark, right? One's follicular phase glow becomes like another standard to measure and compare one to everyone else on social media. Yeah, that's heavy. When we internalize these patterns as expectations, it can provide a space where shame can grow. I've had some clients who have shared that they felt bad at cycle syncing simply because their energy shifts are subtle, not dramatic. And different isn't wrong. Different is just different. So this is where the conversation kind of starts to widen some, where we can start to really, really see where we can respect cycle syncing as a practice that's about attunement, not just about efficiency. Attunement can really require a level of gentleness. It's a physiological state that tells our nervous system that it's safe to respond. And when we approach our cycles with this curiosity instead of judgment, something like fatigue can become a signal, not a flaw, right? PMS itself can become a messenger, not a aspect that we have to take on as part of our identity. Variation can become inflammation. Gentleness activates our parasympathetic nervous system, and it supports social engagement, connection, and body awareness. It also lets us know what our body needs rather than trying to override it with what our body should do. So I just want to put on the table that gentleness, I really try to frame the practice of cycle syncing in terms of gentleness and self-reflection and curiosity, so that it's more of a parasympathetic practice. It's a practice that supports connection and body awareness, not criticism and self-criticism. A mature relationship with cycle syncing will perhaps ask, what is my body capable of right now, rather than how do I optimize this phase? It may involve you tracking your actual experience alongside your phase. It may ask you to consider, right, what has sleep been like, and life events and stress alongside your hormones. It may require adjustments in real time, not letting the framework dictate to you, but allowing it to guide you. And it may celebrate as subtle shifts. Even small changes in energy, mood, and focus are profound. Also, a mature relationship with cycle syncing is also going to be sure to look for patterns over multiple cycles instead of one-off cycles. As I've said before, this is a slow flow practice. This is a practice that takes time. And like anything that we become intimate with, time, like allowing for slowness and time to step in. So for those who are navigating hormone imbalances or navigating certain things with their cycle, it's really, really important to ensure that we're not framing this practice with any kind of pressure. I've seen clients, for example, who are trying to conceive and become very, very rigid about cycle syncing. And one of the things that we work to unpack is how stress, adding stress in a space that is meant to be nurturing is right antithetical to what the practice is intended for. I've seen those who cycles have actually changed under the pressure of so much monitoring, and really softening their approach and allowing more space for general support is what allows for their cycles to be regular, and for those who wanted to go on to conceive to be more so supported in doing so. So as I've said before, just to gently emphasizes that cycle syncing really does work best when it's rooted in a relationship with yourself, with your body, instead of looking at the practice as some form of self-correction. Some red flags, some indicators that you may consider softening your approach. If tracking feels like surveillance, if you're overriding your body's needs to meet a phase expectation, if you're feeling anxious or guilty or inadequate for not matching the quote-unquote typical energy, or if there's a sense that you have lost spontaneity or flexibility due to rigidly adhering to the practice, if any of those resonate, it may be time to reconnect with why you started cycle syncing and support yourself, releasing as much judgment as possible. Some practical steps, I'll give 6 practical steps to soften your approach to cycle syncing. The reframe that cycle syncing is information, not instruction. Practicing flexibility. Do what your body wants to do instead of what the phase is telling you you're supposed to do, quote unquote. The third one, track with curiosity, not judgment. Ask, what else is affecting me, right? This is very interesting information. Is there anything else to this context? Focusing on general support like nutrition, movement, stress management, rather than perfect execution of any one area. Taking breaks from tracking, right? That's actually something that I've actually encouraged certain clients to do, is like, it's okay to take breaks from tracking. If you're not using, say, fertility awareness as part of your means of contraception, then definitely like taking breaks can be very, very powerful and supportive part of both cycle syncing and fertility awareness practices. And then working with a practitioner like myself who does understand the nuance and can support you in knowing what is really, really essential to pay attention to and what is kind of not really as important, or maybe not as important right now, because everything can't be important all the time. That's just way too much pressure. So for more practical guidance or resources, courses like my Cycle Connection course, please check out my Substack. I have a ton of resources there. Also my website, I have a ton of resources on my website as well as my free resource library. I have quite a few resources on cycle syncing specifically. So in closing out, if cycle syncing has ever made you feel behind or confused or inadequate, I want to just share that discomfort is not any kind of proof that you're doing the practice wrong or you're failing or something. Not at all. What it may be a signal of is that there's an invitation on the table, and that invitation is to soften your approach. Right? Soften your approach, relax and slow into the approach, instead of treating it as yet another system checklist to judge yourself by. So I hope that someone out there finds this useful. If you do, please be sure to drop by and say hi. I love to hear from others on this journey and who are wanting to connect in community and have conversations. I really do thank you for spending time with me, for being part of this community. If you'd like to go deeper into today's topic, I invite you over onto my Substack. And the full article and resources and all of that is there. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. And thanks for listening as always. And I'll see you next time. In the meantime, be sure to stay connected.
That does it for this episode of the Connection Care Community Podcast with Majida. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you're leaving with a fresh perspective on your body and overall well-being, along with practical tools you can integrate into daily life. The support doesn't stop here. Be sure to connect with us online at connectioncaretherapy.com for more resources to guide you on your journey. You can also find us on Substack and connect with Majida on Instagram at Majida Sai'da. Remember to rate, review, and share this podcast. And most importantly, stay connected.